Fellow auto detailers, welcome to the show that features interviews with today's most successful auto detailers. This is the Auto Detailing Podcast. Here's your host, Jimbo Balaam.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to this episode of the Auto Detailing Podcast. I'm Jimbo, your host. This episode is brought to you by Autofiber.com, premium microfiber towels, and something I'm really excited about, probably because I have such a passion for the Australia-New Zealand region, autofiber.com.au. So if you're down in New Zealand, Australia, that area, forgive me, I'm geographically retarded. So anyway, if you're in that area, autofiber.com.au, you can use code Jimbo. The code is live down there as well, down under, as it is in the States. So again, since this is a global podcast, I wanted to make sure we hit as globally as possible and take care of as many people as possible. There's also Autofiber Canada, so you can do autofiber.ca for Canadian buyers interested in that. And that'll help get you all the towels that I talk about at a good price, even in your home country or region. And so if you're kind of over on that side of the world there in Australia, you can dip them and hopefully save some coin on shipping. So, but of course, use code Jimbo and we will get you all taken care of. Today is going to be a solo episode. I'm actually doing an odor removal job as I record this, and I have some downtime while I let my ozone generator, excuse me, and I'm also coming off this really bad cough. Anyway, I'm letting my ozone generator run in this G-Wagon. And so I decided to hop in the truck and do this podcast for today because I think it's something that, if I'm being completely transparent, I don't go through as often anymore, but I still do from time to time. And before starting the podcast, it's something that I dealt with a lot, like as in every year, sometimes every 6 months. And usually it would happen when I was the weather was hotter, and I was really busy with cars and doing like kind of a lot of office buildings, and that's kind of when it seemed to happen the most. But obviously you could probably tell by the title of this, it's burnout. And I think it's something that doesn't really get talked about in the detailing industry, but it's something that I know, me personally, I've gone through, and then also a lot of guys that I've talked to, whether that be at Mobile Tech Expo, even though I didn't attend this year, last year when I was there, talked to a couple guys about it, at SEMA, and it seems like it's one of those things, and the detailing industry happens to be one of those industries that burnout happens really quickly. It happens often. And if you don't know how to kind of get out of that funk, it could be really detrimental to your business, because what happens is when you suffer from burnout, and I'll just speak from experience, when you suffer from burnout, you don't put the energy, time, and effort into your business like you do when you're on fire for it, and therefore your business starts to suffer. And then when you come out of the funk or come out of the burnout, your business can really have taken a hit. So there's a few things that I try to do when this happens, and a few things that I've done within the last few years to not deal with this as often as I talked about. So the first thing that's probably the most obvious and easiest to do is just to get away from it, right? And not get away from it forever, but if you can, take a weekend trip getaway somewhere. Take a week trip getaway somewhere if you can. And I know the first argument that I would have is, well, I can't afford to do that. That's why I'm working so hard. That's why I'm burnt out, is because I can't afford anything. But here's the thing. If you make the investment in yourself to get away, kind of clear your mind, kind of get away from all the day-to-day crap that sometimes happens with detailing, it can just kind of clear your mind, can kind of clear your thoughts, kind of re-energize you, kind of re-put you on the path that you want to be on, because you did start it at some point, right? And I was the biggest proponent against this for the longest time. And in fact, this past week or two ago, For the first time since my wife and I had been married, which is coming up on 10 years, we took a really big family trip, a week-long trip. We went to Hawaii, whatever, and it was not cheap. It was a very expensive trip, but it was an expensive investment in not only our family as a family time, but also a time for me to kind of reset, and we kind of strategized that around the new year. Time for my wife to reset with her business, and also to re-motivate and re-engage us. And that was something that I've been against for a really long time. You can ask my wife, she'll tell you that. But what I found out is that in the long run, it's actually significantly cheaper to do that, because you come back so much hungrier, you come back on fire, you come back just ready to go, because you've set idle for a few days. Instead of being in the day-to-day monotony of the business, you've taken and removed yourself completely from that. And I'm not saying you have to go to Hawaii. I'm not saying you even have to take 7 days. Every person's going to be different. But if you're going to take a few days off, I would recommend going somewhere outside of your current location. And trust me, I'm the biggest homebody ever. So that's number one, kind of just remove yourself from the day-to-day monotony of it. The second thing is to get with other detailers, or get with other like-minded people. Now, this may sound kind of contrary to the burnout thing, and that's why number one was to get completely away, completely remove yourself from the situation. Because maybe you don't want to be around other detailers. Maybe you don't even want to see cars. You want to go somewhere where there's no cars, an island of no cars at all, and all that. Number two is to get around other like-minded people and see what they're doing, because when you see and you're around other people, and this is where like Mobile Tech Expo comes into play, which I'm really excited that they have one in Vegas coming up in the later part of the year. So now they're going to have kind of an East Coast, West Coast deal, because for us West Coast guys to travel all the way to Florida for a 2-day show or a day-and-a-half show, 2 days, maybe a training day in there, 2.5 days. It's quite an investment to fly all the way across the country. And it's also a quick trip. It's kind of a turnaround trip. Last year, even when I did it in 2 nights with the time change and all that, it is a little funky to try to feel the time change, and then the late nights, early mornings. It's kind of hard to adjust. But if you can make it out to those events, you're around other people that are really trying to make big splashes within the industry. So that can motivate you. That can rejuvenate you. You can meet the guy in person that you've been following on YouTube. You can meet the guy in person that you listen to his podcast. Hey. But you aside from that, you meet everyday common detailers that are a lot like you, and they're just trying to move and shake and make waves and kind of make stuff happen within their niche. And that is really motivating. And I'll tell you one thing that I've learned from being around other detailers, and that is that detailers are awesome in person. Awesome. Regardless of what goes on in Facebook groups, regardless of what goes on in forums and all, I guess forums not so much anymore, but Facebook groups and forums, right? New ways of forums. Detailers in person and the people that invest their own money, their hard-earned money to go to these events are awesome, awesome people. And so I would definitely encourage you to make the investment in yourself to go to these places, whether it be SEMA, Mobile Tech, whatever. Make the investment in yourself to get to that. It is well worth it. So another thing you can do is take on an employee. And taking on an employee kind of brings on its own stressors and its own issues. But again, it's removing you from the monotony of the day-to-day. And where I found burnout happens is when you're dealing with a super heavy load consistently, right? So it seems like it's never ending. You're kind of never getting ahead of the workload. You're kind of never quite accomplishing what you want with each car. There's, maybe a couple customers have complained about something, and that starts to snowball because you're just burnt out. And again, it turns into this huge thing. So bringing on an employee or a helper, or in my favorite case, another detailer that has their own business and can kind of come alongside you And again, the reason why I like that, and I've gone into this in detail in other places, but the reason I really like the idea of another business owner is, one, they're not an employee technically, legally, and two, they probably will work much faster, much more efficient, and you won't have to train them. So that's kind of a little hack that I really like for that. And then lastly, and this one may be a little bit more radical, but it's, again, something that I've had to do from time to time and have done it again more recently. Well, two more things. So I guess the first thing I will say is to start creating content on the internet, right? So that's going to help your business, or start creating videos or taking pictures or writing blog posts or writing articles about your business or your industry or whatever. And I kind of group all that into the quote unquote creating content. And this has multiple purposes too, because it could really help to elevate and grow your business and your influence within this industry. And this is one of the main things that has helped me, that I talked about in the beginning of this podcast, to help me from overcoming this burnout. And that is just creating content and talking about, guys, this podcast started because I just talked about what I was doing. And I just happened to have a lot of stuff to talk about because, one, I'd been doing it for 5 years, and two, I was touching a lot of cars because I was doing mainly office building work when I started. But creating content and then interviewing other people has motivated me, because you're constantly thinking about what piece of content you could put out there, constantly thinking about the next podcast episode, the next video, the next blog post, the next picture. And then you're trying to find that content within your day-to-day work, or you're trying to find that substance within your day-to-day work, which kind of takes your mind off, like, oh my gosh, I'm just vacuuming and shampooing this rug again, or I'm doing this 95 Camry and it sucks, right? So creating content, or trying to, the fact of the matter is, all of us, if you're detailing cars, have content right in front of our face all day, every day. It's just kind of turning your mindset to think about that content and then to actually capture that content. But doing that, and for me, talking with other detailers and turning that into content has been a huge motivator for me. And it's turned me on to stuff like rinseless washing, waterless washing, coatings, correction, machines, and it's also opened up other avenues with these companies that sometimes are additional revenue streams, sometimes they're not. And I guess that would be another one, additional revenue streams and diversification. But really, it just takes your mind out of the monotony that car detailing can be sometimes. And the monotony comes in many forms. It could be paint polishing, it could be applying a coating, it could be vacuuming, it could be extracting, it could be steaming. I mean, the repetitiveness of this industry is huge. So that's where burnout comes in too. And kind of with that content strategy, I guess, like I just mentioned, being diversified, not only within your service offerings. So it's cool to see a lot of guys not only offering correction and coatings, but clear bra, window tinting, rim repair, PDR, all that, because that will sometimes thrust you out of the same old, kind of that cycle that we get into when it's like, oh, let me quote this car, get the car, customer drops it off, start with the interior, then exterior, then we're done, collect payment, start it all over again, maybe 6 hours later. And so diversifying your services, again, something I've talked about for a long time, not only saves you when the weather gets bad, or saves you in different times of the year, but it also helps break up the monotony of it, which will help significantly when it comes to burnout. So diversify your services. For an example, right now I'm doing an odor removal, and while I'm doing the odor removal, I could pump out content or record content to pump out later. I'm diversifying my services. This week in California, we're dealing with a whole week of rain, and though I have multiple details lined up because customers have waited or they just don't care that it's raining, it's nice to have a diversified service like an odor removal that I can make about as much money as I would with a detail, with something that I'm not physically having to do and the machine is doing the work for me. So again, to me, a machine or a system, those have been my employees. So there's that. And the last one I'll talk about today, and I'll kind of save the rest for when my throat's not hurting so bad, I guess, is that maybe change your clientele altogether. Now, this may have to come little by little, but again, a lot of what I'm realizing lately is that kind of like investing money in your future so that you have money when you retire. A lot of what work and life comes down to is investing in yourself now for dividends that pay off later. So you may just be working with a bad group of clients. You may be dealing with a bunch of cheap people, a bunch of people that treat you like crap, think that you're just a lot boy. They don't think highly enough of you. They don't feel like you're that craftsman that you want to be, that master detailer, or whatever term you want to put on yourself. Maybe your current clientele isn't meeting that need. They don't see that in you. And so maybe you need to start taking some serious steps to change your clientele. Now, this is a very long-term play, or it could be a very short-term play, depending upon your finances and how you could swing it. So what maybe would you do? Well, I've taken the long-term approach on it and slowly changed the direction of my business and continue to, and I'll tell you where I'm going now. So where I was when I started this podcast, and the low-hanging fruit, considering I started during a recession here in California, was office buildings. So I probably had 15 to 20 office buildings that I would maintenance on a regular basis, which led to usually, I think I was averaging 10 to 12 cars a day. And I did that for years and years and years. And that's where like every 6 to 12 months, my burnout was coming from. I'm just doing like basic car washes, wash and waxes, sometimes full details, and occasionally picking up that retail client. But what I started to realize is I could do one retail client, service them within a 3 to 4 hour window, and make more money than I did servicing that office building, in 6 or 7 hours. Now, the problem with that is you have to find how you get that reoccurring revenue and that reoccurring money like the office buildings can be. And that's what makes an office building work really desirable, is that it's reoccurring. So now where I am, but I realized that was part of the reason why I was being burnt out. So now what I've done is I have 0 office buildings left, and I've transitioned to only retail work, only in the driveway at people's houses, or they bring it to me. That's it. And mainly express details, corrections and coatings here and there. But for the most part, express details. I actually, part of the transition was I really don't do old cars anymore, older cars. I really stick with cars that are, 3 to 5 years old. And I've, of course, raised my prices on those quote unquote express details. But where I'm transitioning now to is and this is kind of one of my goals for 2019, I really want to dive a lot deeper into coatings. I'm taking that a lot more serious, starting to throw a ton of money at ads for coatings. Because again, it's kind of like when I transitioned from office buildings to full-blown retail, I can make more money in less time, less effort, less energy, less cars per week. And so that's what right now I'm down to probably, where I was 10 to 12 cars a day, I'm probably down to 10 to 12 cars a week. And I would really like to take that down to about 3 to 5 cars a week. But just getting higher level jobs, and hold on to a few of my regulars that I've had for a long time, but that's where I'm transitioning to. So not to be the correction and coating guy, but to be the higher dollar job guy. And for right now, where I see that is in the application of coatings. And I have a few ideas that I don't feel like any shops or detailers around me are kind of taking advantage of to exploit that coating niche. And I'll talk about that at a later date. I just feel like a lot of shops and detailers around me are kind of following the same old, and they're just copying other detailers. And I have some fresh approaches that I think I can kind of capitalize on some white space. So it may be that for you. It may be taking advantage or changing your clientele altogether. And so you're going to have to take steps at that to make that work. Going to have to invest time and energy and effort into your website, maybe some ads and some money, maybe joining something like the Detailer Inner Circle. But that may really help you to get a whole different arena, a whole different clientele that you're trying to serve. So I just wanted to kind of put that out on the podcast. I know a lot of guys deal with burnout, and it happens more often than not. A lot of guys are embarrassed to talk about it because it's something that, they were so passionate about when they started, and it was a passion project, and then it became a business, and as soon as it became a business, they just kind of got burnt out automatically on it. So I hope that helps some of you out there that may be suffering with burnout. Maybe you have and you've overcome it. If you have, I'd love to hear your strategies of how you've overcome burnout as well. Let me know on that one. You can message me at the Auto Detailing Podcast or Jimbo Balaam everywhere on social. And yeah, guys, that's all I got for today. Check out autofiber.com.au or autofiber.com, and of course, the Detailer Inner Circle. Catch you guys on the next one. See ya.